What is this guy doing? Sure looks like he flipped down a thing. Is he going to come back in costume, you think?
No, no,
Oh.
no, no, no. Yes, actually, we're talking about books, so I was gonna wear fake glasses.
Should I take mine off? So you can see the horrible bags under my eyes that are hidden by my glasses. So yeah, okay. That sure sounded like the theme song to the hit television series Game of Thrones that aired on HBO from 2010 to 2019, 2020, 2011, 2020. I don't remember. So yeah, when I said I was happy to be here, I thought I was. And so yeah. So Game of Thrones was a fantasy series, very well loved until it wasn't anymore.
I'm gonna put the meme up of the
horse.
Horse.
You gotta. I mean, that is
the critical reason to them.
That's it, man.
As far as season 6, it has 90s in user and
there was a season 6. I thought it was a bold choice to end at season 4 when they were on top of their game. In this alternate world that I live in, where I didn't watch any of the rest of them.
What a bold choice that you made at home.
Oh, they just stopped. Hey, that's cool. It was good while it lasted. Thanks, Benioff and Weiss. I'll see you later.
So yeah, up through season 6, 90s, like high critical responses across the board. And season 6 was really like a big hopeful thing for people because they were like, oh my gosh, this is past where the books are at. They can do it.
I want you to imagine that the seasons were a train, and that the books they were based on were the rails.
Tracks, yeah.
Yeah, the tracks. As soon as those tracks ran out, the train kept going. But a train can only keep going on its current course without tracks for so long before the entire thing
explodes into a fireball.
Assuming it's, not electric and it's like a steam engine or something.
Yeah. So you're going to have a lot more to say to this because I want to hear about your opinion. Everyone has just by and large just said it was great, but you're a diehard fan of the books.
Right.
So I feel like you'd have an interesting take on...
We talked about Mass Effect last time too, right? A little bit?
Yeah.
Mass Effect Andromeda? Okay. Mm-hmm. So the kind of person that likes Mass Effect for its world building, the kind of person who goes into the codex on Mass Effect and sits there and reads every single entry, i.e. me, loves books like A Song of Ice and Fire, that series that George R.R. Martin wrote that became the television series Game of Thrones. The first book being A Game of Thrones. Very dense stuff, lot of characters, so many characters that it's going to be hard to keep track of them. And you'll probably have to look up the A Song of Ice and Fire wiki to be like, wait a minute, who was that? That's fine. It's still very well written with a shift after the first book. The first book was George R.R. Martin writing books because he needed to write books to make a living. And it's something he liked doing. A lot of his books were similar around that time. I think A Game of Thrones came out in like 1996, maybe. Mm. If that's wrong, put the correct date like right there. But the second one, he started to see a lot of success because it was like, oh man, what a great book. And I feel like his writing kind of got a little, not lazy, but like, not as engaging, not as interesting. The story itself was still interesting, though, for the remainder of the following books, of which there were 5. Ending with, if you've watched the show, spoilers ahead, whatever, ends with Jon Snow being stabbed to death, ends with Stannis lost in the snow. He's not at the wall. He's not at Winterfell. He has no idea where he is. Actually, I think they have an idea of where they are, but they're in the snow and they're stuck. And that's all we see. Oh man. Brienne of Tarth has just gone to Jaime saying, I need you to come with me, but it seems like she's leading him into a trap with a character that's non-existent in the show called Lady Stoneheart, and that sucks because she is so cool. But yeah, so it ends on an essential cliffhanger on multiple threads, and that's super interesting. All that to say, read Fever Dream. which is George R.R. Martin's Vampire on the Mississippi River novel that he wrote a long time ago.
What?
Really good. Oh, wait, no, sorry. We're talking about Game of Thrones. So, yes, I am a big fan of the books. You will not see them behind me because I read them all on Kindle. And a lot of these books and comics I got before I did that, or they're like comics and manga and stuff that I can't really read comfortably on a Kindle. So, yes, I'm a big fan. I've got a lot of feelings about the books. I've got a lot of feelings about the first 4 seasons of the television show as well. In a medium like television, you have an hour, if it's an hour-long show, to present your characters, your plot, and any exposition necessary to move all of that along.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning the sheer volume of characters will be truncated when compared to the book. Cool. I get
Yes.
it. That's fine. The first season of Game of Thrones, excellently executed, and you get the same feelings by and large watching it that you get reading it. There's only minor truncating of what's going on.
It's been a long time since I read the book, but I remember, I think I told you about this before. The first one is so close of an adaptation to the book that there are moments where I got I feel like there are shots of like Sean Bean being quiet and thoughtful,
where you can like read like what's
that coincide with lines from the book that say, you know, he thought to himself ... And it's like
when Arya says, yeah, he's nothing like his father. I don't blah blah blah, and then Ned is like, oh my god, I need you guys to go away. You can like see the wheels turning in his head.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that because of Benioff and Weiss, or is that because Sean Bean is such a great actor? It's hard to say.
Well, they had to edit it. I mean, you know, they had to direct it.
Sure.
You know, he could have just performed that way, but I don't know if he's like, you know, all right, he's like holding a script and like hidden in the script is a book.
Right. Like hiding what you're really reading, and he's just reading A Song of Ice and Fire underneath. So then the second season comes along, and I think that the reason that these books are so good is that they are fantasy, they are high fantasy, but it's not about fantasy. It's about awful people looking out for number one. That's what the whole series is about. And even if you don't think they're all awful, they're all awful. But they're all good too, because that's what human beings are. Like if you found a wallet in the street, what would you do? Okay, you found a wallet in the street with no ID. What would you do? You found a wallet in the street with nothing in it but cash. What would you do? Like, what would you do? That's what these books are about. It's like, human beings are human beings. The show doesn't handle that quite as well. The show does it okay for the first 4 seasons, maybe 5. I didn't see 5.
Well, I'll be straight up. If it helps make it more comfortable for you, I was very critical of the show when I was watching it because I tend to get reactionary when I feel like something is trying to shock me. Yeah, there's not a lot of things that are going to successfully shock me. It's just going to be like, wow, when you could have taken a swing at doing something creative or with some storytelling merit, instead you wasted it trying to invoke this response. You know,
anything in particular stand out to you?
So the Red Wedding, I feel like is handled really well. But I agree with critics who say that you don't need to direct someone to stab someone in the baby. You know?
So that's another thing so I'm trying to separate some of that from the book. So in the book, you know, she's not there. Robb Stark's wife is not there. She is safely ensconced somewhere else at the Spicer Castle, I think. And she may or may not be pregnant. They hand her over to Jaime Lannister after the fact, except it may or may not be her because they give 2 different descriptions. Except George R.R. Martin came out later and was like, yeah, I just screwed up. So it's probably her.
Okay.
But none of that's in the show. Again, also the feeling of the Red Wedding in the book is insane. It's super tense. It's already like a slow burn tense because it's like, man, we screwed up. Rob got married. He wasn't supposed to get married. Now we're having this party to marry off my brother. And then like she notices all these things, and then it builds and builds and builds, and then a crescendo of madness culminating in her death is amazing. Now the show can't quite communicate that as well.
Well,
And that's fine. And that's why I'm trying to separate that.
they do it in their own way, but again, like so actually hearing that
Reigns
song,
of Castamere.
which was I thought a great rendition of it,
Sure. Yeah, it was
and
good.
the performances of like dread that brings on, followed by like the way that they didn't do anything in this dramatic slow-mo tragic kind of thing that could have been like overwrought and sappy and all this kind of stuff, but I really think they did a good job. It's just that there are two writers in that writer's room. And I think I have a pretty good sense after watching it on HBO, and afterwards you hear them speak to which ones wrote the show. And then there was this great show on Netflix starring the Dean from Community called The Writer's Room, where it talked about them doing their process, where they talked about how Jim Rash.
I had to remember.
Yes. Where they talked about how their writing process is swapping half of the script back and forth for editing. They each write half the story, and then they edit each other, and they go back and forth, and that's how they write. So when you get to like season 5 and you get to, I'm sorry, spoiler, the death of Shireen.
Shireen Baratheon, daughter of Stannis Baratheon.
Yes.
Hey, that's not in the book.
It's not. Is it not in the book?
No, because
Okay.
Sorry, I'll get to that later. Please continue.
One half of that episode is a big, exciting dragon fight. The other half of that episode is a somber fire to the death of Shireen, where they're careful. So you can hear the difference in her screaming before and after she's on fire.
Nice. Lovely. Yeah, so again, that's where it starts to break down, is because that's like, that's past the book, kind of, where the Iron Bank is coming to Stannis because they're like, hey man, nobody else is going to pay us. We'll put our strength behind you if you pay us. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. Sounds good. But also thematically speaking, Stannis is just almost using the Melisandre just as much as Melisandre is using him. Because he's like, no more burning people. We're doing what we're doing. And he expressly says that in the book. He's like, nope, we're not doing that. And so for him to then burn his own daughter doesn't make sense for the character within the context of the book. So the question is, which Stannis is more interesting? It's hard to say. I'm going with book Stannis. Because there's all these little things to where like he's like Robert, except he's uptight. Also, Renly is like Robert too, except he's looser than Robert. It's almost as if there's like a gradient for the three brothers, where the first one, the oldest one, is super uptight, and the middle one is kind of raucous and like.
He's kind of a blend of the two because he's an authority figure. He's the king.
People love him like they love Renly, but he still governs mostly kind of like Stannis. And then Renly is just like, whatever, I'm having a good time.
Not a long time.
But not a long time. Another spoiler there. So, yeah. Also, that's...
Okay,
that's
so is it fair to say for you that from the seasons you've seen, you favor the books?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so as far as the critical response, with the books going further and further away in adaptation and with the writers getting more and more confident with their own voice instead of leaning on to George R. R. Martin. Although George R. R. Martin did script at least one episode each season. So like season 2, the Blackwater battle.
Yeah, that was kind of disappointing to me. It was cool.
He wrote
but
it.
Again, the book, there's so much more for you to imagine in your own mind, and you can't do that on television.
Okay. So do you think critically it maintaining this?
As a fan of the book, no.
Okay.
But I cannot in good conscience say that the critical response wasn't earned just because I'm a fan of the books and the books are more enjoyable and have a lot more substance. Is the critical response earned for the first few seasons? Yes. Now, that's because they establish rules and they follow them. And then they don't do that so much from what I understand later on.
Season 1.
Yes.
90. I'm just going off of Rotten Tomatoes, and I'm not going to look at what the average rating was. I'm just going off of the percentage of people who said that it's a tomato versus a Rotten Tomato. Season 1, 90%, 96%. Okay? Season 2, 96, 96. Season 3, 96, 97. See, people really like Season 3. And to their credit, I feel like Season 3 is probably the closest they get to the heart of that show.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Season 4, with the battle at the wall and everything with not the Sand Snakes. I think they were only Season 5 though, because they're out when they come in after Oberyn is gone. But Oberyn Martell, the world's decision to recognize Pedro Pascal, is sort of like the peak, 97%.
And then
but it's for different reasons. So like this is the peak of them kind of getting the heart of the book in Season 3, even though they had started
is that
to
the
cut
heart
things out.
beating, by the way, when you were doing that?
And then Season 4 though is this sort of everyone is so frustrated by all of the characters at this point that you finally get a little catharsis, and then you don't, but that's another so that's a downside. It seems like you really have like a hopeful section of the story, and that's Joffrey dies, which
You're
I think
like, yay!
probably
but then Tyrion
responsible.
gets blamed. Oh no!
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Season 5, 93, 90.
Okay.
Season 6, 94, 93. Season 7, 93, 82. Season 8, 55, 30.
That's quite a drop, ladies and gentlemen.
And actually, I'm glad to see that for Season 7, because I was somebody who, when Season 7 was coming out, we knew we were watching the finale of the show. They're both like half a season. They're truncated. They're not full-length seasons. And I felt like there were a lot of people who were reacting to it based on how they think it should be done. And it's really easy to do that when you're watching the show, because you know it's basically a fan's interpretation of what they think the ending will be. Mm-hmm. Like they're trying to deliberately not directly adapt the ending they were told. They're trying to use it as a guideline. And so everyone's like, this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad. And everyone was really critical. But to me, it was sort of like, I made comparisons to Lord of the Rings. Everyone complains about the ending of The Return of the King being so long. But when you acknowledge Lord of the Rings as one movie and you realize that that's the ending to an 11-hour movie or a 9-hour movie, depending on which versions you watch, it's pretty appropriate. When it came to Season 7, they have to start concluding things. And so everyone got a little reactive. So I actually agree with the general consensus here. The Score Details show an average 8 out of 10 rating for the critics that said like 93% of them gave it like an 8 out of 10 average rating. So like, I like that. But Season 8, I don't want to break your heart. Like
I already know. It's okay. Yeah, that's when they start fast traveling. It's when they start making decisions that don't make sense.
That's Season 7.
Character. Oh, good. So we're already fast traveling.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It made sense in the world. Like you didn't really get the feeling of this happening, but at least they explained it. Where, like they said, Robert is coming to Winterfell.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be here in like a month because it takes a month for his whole train to make it to Winterfell. It doesn't feel that way necessarily, but at least they say it's going to take a minute and he'll be here. And then other times they do take a while for things to happen. It's like, well, I'm going this way and it's going to be a minute. Like Jamie riding to Dorne takes a while.
It's like in the earlier seasons, if you want to fast forward in time, it's generally okay because time can fast forward with it's what everyone is doing takes a long time. Mm-hmm. So moving forward works. But when you need to send a raven to somebody and it's like really crucial information that you need and like you're conversing with someone about as quickly as it takes for you to send an email to somebody.
You know, I said I couldn't in good conscience just compare it to the books and say the books are better. But I am about to do that with things like Euron Greyjoy. In the show, that doesn't feel like it's super rushed. Feels like they don't explore the mythology of the Greyjoys. It feels like, yep, he's in charge now. Everybody go. And then he's gonna team up with Cersei. Okay, except what's going on with Victarion in Slaver's Bay trying to woo Daenerys? That's interesting. What's going on with the Martells in the situation after their son dies? Was he in the show, by the way, at all?
Who?
Doran Martell? Not Doran. Is that who I'm thinking of? The son they send.
Oh, no.
Daenerys.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, so I think the problem, and I say this is related to the book, to me it's related more to storytelling, is they have established by season 5, let's say, the big houses in each area of the Seven Kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
What they need to do is now show each of those houses independently doing their thing, making it become like a who's gonna win instead of being the Stark show or the Tyrion show.
Well,
and that's really it.
They did. They were basically going main character by main character, whittling people down. When you're right, it should have been like an episode spent on a house, an episode spent on a house. But you know what I think the problem is? And this is part of the critical reaction. I don't think people have patience for that. I don't think viewers would keep tuning in week to week if it's like, you mean this week is just going to be a Martell week?
Well, I don't mean all of it. Like the whole episode.
I do.
I don't necessarily mean that.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm on board with that, but you're right. The general public wouldn't be, and that wouldn't be palatable. Interactions between houses, at the very least, from episode to episode. So like the Tyrells and the Martells, and then the Tyrells and the Starks, and then the Starks and somebody else, and sort of daisy chain along. That'd be interesting.
I think the core divide where people started to sort of turn against the writers was their handling of the Martell house. And
I sure didn't like it.
The Sand Snakes in particular.
Didn't they kill what's his name? Bashir from Star Trek. The dad.
It's been way too long.
The Prince of Dorne. They kill him for no reason. But in the book, he's like, I've got all these plans going.
Yes.
And I need you to chill, Sand Snakes, because I've got these plans going. I wasn't going to tell you that, but now I'm telling you that. So you chill. Can you please chill? And in the show, they just kill him.
Well, yeah, because that's what it seemed like is they didn't consider that necessarily a big part of the drive towards the ending the way they wanted to tell it. And that's when you get into that reactionary kind of, well, then you're not going by the story. You're telling the fan fiction version of the story. And that's when people started to split off, is season 5. So it's like season 5, it's like you guys are going too far away from the source material. And then season 5 ends and people are like, oh, we're past the books. Season 4 and 5 were book 4 split into 2 seasons. And the season 6, it was like, oh, Wow, this whole thing with Ramsey and the Battle of the Bastards and like the way all of this is handled was, I gotta say, like people talk about a golden age of television, and I think we went through like a big wave of that, and now I think we're in a different age of television because of streaming and all this kind of stuff. But that is some of the most cinematic. Like, I really would like you to get through season 6 once, even though you'll be, you know,
we'll see. Even
insane.
if I have to pull my hair out, and that's tough. Let me tell you, I have to get like
Pull your hair out.
down, like, oh yeah, that too. Pull
Yeah.
my hair out.
So, as someone who is more in tune with the differences, okay,
Yes.
season 1, is it fair that it's like an A plus?
I saw season 1 before reading the books.
Okay.
It's what got me to read the books.
Okay.
And then when I read the books, I was like, this is like the first season minus, some characters here and there, but the important stuff is all there. I could have been one of those snobs who had read the book like 5 years earlier, because a friend of mine told me in like 2007, like, hey, I'm reading this book series, Song of Ice and Fire. You should read it. And I was like, yeah, cool, whatever. And then I never read it.
You want to apologize to that friend now?
Ryan, I'm so sorry. And if you're watching this, I'm sorry that you had to sit through this too. I'm just kidding, Eric. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Eric. Eric, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. But season 2 hits its stride as a show, and as a television show, it earns its critical reception, I think.
Okay.
Because it is about... So you remember how I said Star Wars is fantasy, and generally speaking, fantasy is not about politics?
Yeah.
This is the flip side. This is a show where it's about politics. It just happens to have dragons and magic.
Yeah.
So it's the flip side of that. And that's what season 2 does well. It's like all these houses, what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Season 3 starts to shift more to Daenerys. Like in season 2, she's wandering around the desert and everything. And then she goes to Karth.
Mm-hmm.
And that really bothers me when she says Quarth. She's never seen it written. It's like she wouldn't mess that up because she read it as Qarth. That's how you mess things up like that. But she just heard somebody say Karth, and then she said Quarth. Why would you do that? You just heard it said. Just say what they said. It's like getting someone's name wrong in an email that they just sent you. So season 3 has more of her like doing her thing, like trying to establish herself. She's like, well, I'm a queen, right? I'm supposed to be a queen. I'm going to be a queen. So she does it. And it's cool. Season 3 has what's going on in the Seven Kingdoms, Marjorie Tyrell and all that stuff. This season 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because I feel like they could have done more with her. And like, did you really mourn Renly? Because it didn't seem like you mourned Renly. It seemed like a marriage of convenience. And her being like, house, well, gosh, I don't know. Like maybe. And then her grandmother, Olenna Tyrell, the very interesting, very entertaining.
The goat.
Does it earn its score? Barely. So then season 4 comes along. And so you've had the Red Wedding at the end of season 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Season 4 and 5 come along, and it's like, you guys kind of seem like you feel like you don't have to try now. It kind of feels like...
Well, you'd have to... Season 4, I think you have to watch.
I saw 4 once.
Oh, okay.
Or whatever it was. 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw season 4 once, and I was like, okay, yeah, that was season, all right. So I don't have the connection that I have to 1 through 3.
So that one, again, season 3 and 4 are the highest reviewed. Season 3 is like 8.5.
Uh-huh.
And season 4 is a 9 out of 10.
I'd have to go back and watch 4 again. And then 5, I was like, oh, I'm not really interested. I don't have time to watch that. So I will say that in and of itself is telling for my opinion of the show, of just being like, well, yeah, they're still making shows out of it. Meanwhile, it has literally been 10 years since the last Song of Ice and Fire book.
So the whole time the show's been going, he's been like, I'm going to write another book too.
And then he never
did.
Lazy sack.
let me make sure I'm not.
I
Yeah,
know you're just living
2011.
your life, George, and like you don't owe us anything really, but we want that book, man. Stop writing rogues and.
Do you
World
know how
Fire.
many well-regarded book series are basically unfinished stories that a literary researcher had to compile things and shadow write the final
Oh yeah.
steps of the story? Like, I know there's that reaction where he just flips off the camera because someone says that he's gonna die before he finishes them, but like, dude, prove us wrong.
Yeah, please. So now it's a race between Patrick Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin. Patrick Rothfuss wrote the Kingkiller Chronicles. Last book came out, you guessed it, 2011. There's supposed to be a third book, and it ends on a kind of cliffhanger. And if you haven't read those, they're they are almost better than Game of Thrones. They are very different books, and I think you're supposed to think that the protagonist is kind of a dickhead, but it comes across that way. So, like, if it's intentional, that's really interesting. If it's unintentional that he's a Mary Sue, then it's just this is bad writing, Pat. But I think that he's waiting for a TV deal or a movie deal, and he's not writing the third one until he gets it, which is too bad because it is fantasy with magic that is explained as like a pseudoscience, and it's really cool.
So I'm really excited to talk about this concept. And again, for like a concluding thing, this is the big point for me that interests me about audiences and people responding to TV media. I'm not sure about books. I feel like it's a different heavy investment in one outing at a time.
Yeah.
One book at a time. But it was about 10 years. It was, the last season came out in
2019.
So 2011 to 2019, 8 years, the better part of a decade. The world changed during Game of Thrones. At the beginning of Game of Thrones, it was shocking to show like rape and kids getting hurt and all this kind of stuff. The Me Too movement happened halfway through Game of Thrones. You know, that it really does shape the way people respond to the show. And the stars of the show gained clout and reputations during it. And so they were able to
like Kit Harington starring in Pompeii.
Yes, that's the one I was referring to.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's totally Kit Harington. Got out of a
and Silent Hill 2, don't forget that.
Yeah.
First Silent Hill, amazing video game adaptation. Second Silent Hill, garbage.
Not the worst thing in the world, I don't think.
Better than Mario Brothers. Better than Street Fighter. Better than any other you could tell me right now, except if you do and I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
Okay. But that's the interesting thing to me is people who may have had a certain opinion in seasons 1 and 2, they might be completely different people by the time they're reacting to seasons 7 and 8. And
so the critical response could just be because of
you've changed,
the world,
and the world's changed, and the show's changed, and there are so many factors in it that trying to, you know, you can only review it in its context. And so trying to look back on it and think about like how they are in relation to one another is odd, because we might read the books in a certain context one year and so watch the show and feel differently about it. And then we might watch the show in a certain year in our lives and feel differently about it later, you know, for different reasons. So it's, I'm really curious about a longer form version of being critical of a piece of media that gives historical context. Like, I want to see...
Thanks. I had a point, damn it. And I don't remember what it was now. Probably should have written it down. Damn it! That's what I was going to say. Okay, sorry.
Do I think Star Wars is a
Do
masterpiece?
you think Star Wars is a masterpiece? That's great, Eric. I'm glad to hear you say that. Alec Guinness hated it.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. We can move it. That's in the past now. We can't do it anymore.
And Alec Guinness hated it. Wait. So what was the original point? Was I was saying? Were you saying like just it depends on the perspective? Like
Maybe it makes more sense now in this part of the conversation. So yeah, in 1977 when they released Star Wars, Alec Guinness was like, "Yeah, I got paid. I didn't much care for it, but I got paid." And he even threw in a little joke in interviews where it was like, "Hey, yeah, I'd like to renegotiate the percentage of the box office take. You said something about the 5%." He was like, "Oh yes, Mr. Guinness, about the 2.5%." So that's funny. But yeah, so no, you're absolutely right. When something comes out, some people are going to hate it and some people are going to love it. And then 20 years go by. As a child, Star Wars was what I was into. You know, that was it. That was the world. And I'm still kind of into Star Wars. But even like 15 years ago, my friend Amber looked at Clone Wars and was like, this is what Star Wars is to people now. And then you look back at The Rise of Skywalker. Someone growing up with Star Wars, that's what Star Wars is.
Yeah.
So they're going to grow up with an entirely different mentality about Star Wars. You can say the same thing about the internet. I grew up right as the internet was like.
But so that's kind of what I'm saying is I feel like it's kind of sketchy to like segment people. Yeah. But I feel like context is important when being critical of something. And so if somebody is going to review Game of Thrones season 7, okay, it should be locked in with their reviews with the other seasons. And you should be able to, like, if you want, see their relationship with the show over time.
Well, that's why
you can. It's out there on the internet, but
yeah, I'm a big fan of like video game stuff in general, as you know. I think you're more into movies. I'm more into video games, but we can talk about either one competently. But I'm a big fan of like there's a channel, an Australian YouTuber named G-Man Lives, and he will have 5 or 6 years ago a review for Half-Life, which I'm streaming on my channel, Skittles O'Henry, on Twitch. And then he has a few years later Half-Life review Redux, where he's like, okay, I did a review a few years ago. I've played it a few times since then. Here's an updated review. I have a lot of respect for that because people change, things change. And if I may get like super sensitive for a moment, you mentioned the Me Too movement. And previously it was like, oh, well, that's just how Hollywood is. Well, it shouldn't be. Get that crap out of there. Yeah. It shouldn't be that way. And now it's different.
Just last episode, we talked about Zack Snyder's Justice League versus Joss Whedon's Justice League.
Joss Whedon is
what's happening?
Human garbage.
We're recording this, apparently, yeah.
Michelle Trachtenberg, as a teenager, was not allowed to be alone in the same room with Joss Whedon, apparently.
Based on an encounter they had that they didn't go into details on. And you know what? I don't think you should have to share the details. I think that should be enough.
Yep.
But
agreed.
It's like a flashback. There is a context of something that was happening through the 2010s where icons and starlets and the idea of the Hollywood, not ironically, like saying ironic is kind of like a slap to the
I will judge you whether or not it's ironic. Go ahead.
Jamie Kennedy made one of the most interesting observations about Hollywood in a recent YouTube video that he's been coming back this series doing, about how Hollywood was founded on the idea of manufacturing stars and dreams, and so they would create personas and have publicity people handle them. And so like Clint Eastwood is a created persona, like the remnants of this. Over the 2010s, that stuff cracked open. You can't get into everyone's lives. You can't hide anything, and people are who they are. We build people up. Like, for example, we're doing with Timothée Chalamet right now, I'm Calling You Out World. And then we just rip them to shreds and eat them like it's, And Timothée Chalamet has already done some sketchy stuff that is obviously going to result in him being called out later. But the context of his life right now is he's just now getting recognition, and he got his starring role in Dune, where he's got mainstream success. So in the process of clawing his way to success, he did a movie with Woody Allen when he already knew sketchy things about Woody Allen, and then tried to distance himself from him in the press, like, oh, I got mine, screw you. So there's already these breadcrumbs of stuff that people are going to call him out for. And it's like the 2010s icons died and were exposed as a fake and a fabrication. Bill Cosby is the first one that pops into my head whenever I think about this. Mm-hmm. But people just falling all over the place. The guy from Another Dad, he turned out to be really sketchy with boys.
Seventh Heaven? Is that one?
Seventh Heaven. Like all the TV dads, like the Weinsteins, like all this kind of stuff in entertainment. And then outside of entertainment, like, actually still in entertainment, but like sports and like all this kind of stuff where people, musicians, you realize that like sex, drugs, and rock and roll was an ideal for a while. Like, do people not realize that? Like, that's literally not just a culture that we allowed, it's a culture that we idolized. Is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Manipulate your brain with drugs, pursue sex out of a relationship, like, first and foremost, and listen to blaring rock and roll and not give a crap, like, be casual about everything and let everything happen regardless of the consequences. And it's like, that was fun, wasn't it? Now we are where we are. And so it was interesting. It's interesting watching Game of Thrones in the last couple of seasons seem kind of neutered from what people were originally praising as the controversial or it was the show where you could watch dragons and boobs and violence where people were getting, mutilated.
But no dragon boobs.
Unfortunately, no bleeding dragon boobs, which is like the goal, which is what they were going towards. And once that was off the table, they had nothing.
The Holy Trinity. But that's the thing is, so things change. But that's the thing is, so as some things change, some things will stay the same. People are going to want to see boobs on television because that's human beings or animals.
Yeah.
Now, as long as that's the actress's choice and she's fine with doing that, and that's something she is comfortable with, go for it. But you can't rope her into a scene that's like, oh, well, you're going to get fired if you don't do this. And I know you don't want to do it, but too bad. That's bad. You don't do that. So I also talked to a friend of mine about cancel culture, for example. And
I just saw this amazing thing that hopefully I'll put up if I can remember the meme and where to find it.
Please.
How about not like as a society, what about instead of cancel culture, consequence culture?
Hey, look at that. Yeah. It's almost as if, like you did something, now you suffer the consequences. You want to cry cancel culture. I'm sorry, you did something that people don't like.
Yeah.